So what is your name, please?
Well, today, like in the last 2 minutes, it's Rose Henry, and I come from the Tla'amin Nation. So the Tla'amin Nation is the nation that is the furthest north of all the Coast Salish territories.
And how did you get involved in the blockades at Ferry Creek?
I read it actually on one of the social media posts about what was happening, and I heard the pleas from both the elder and from his niece, you know, when they were writing it on the social media. You know, the call out went out the first weekend about 10 months ago, so that would have been, you know, early, 2020.
From your perspective, how would you describe in general the situation that is taking place over there?
The situation, like, as far as, like the land and everything?
Yeah,
like,
the land, and maybe if you could introduce us also to the Pachidat and Didigat nations and sort of just explain the situation as you see it.
See, that's where I like your wording in that, because right away I'm like, okay, slot it, divide it, yeah. It's like, we're talking about the land. The land, it's beautiful. It's in a beautiful location, but the visual, aesthetics of the land is, really deceiving, because on the outside they have a beautiful curtain of, lovely cedar, fir trees, and it looks like, a little piece of heaven. But then once you get about 20 feet past that curtain, it looks like shit.
So for people who don't know, how many nations are sort of territorially there, and who are they?
Currently, Ferry Creek is situated between Pachidat, Dididat, and the Hupitsit, I believe, which is a portion of Banfield, Port Alberni. And so the Dididat people are, really close to Nitnat Lake, and then the Pachidat people are close to Port Renfrew. So the forestry that we're talking about is situated between the three nations, and also situated right next door to the Carmana Walbrin, rainforest. And so people are missing that link, like 25 years ago we were out there speaking up and demanding that the Carmana be protected, and we won. It was a long battle, but we won it. The Walbrin and Carmana, right next door to Ferry Creek, are, protected old growth, but right now the health of the vegetation in that area is not as secure as what it could have been or should be, because of the destruction that is happening over in Ferry Creek area.
For people who don't know about Ferry Creek, can you maybe just explain what it is in terms of the watershed?
It's right above the watershed, which is really sad. It's like, so like the watershed, that feeds so many of the lakes and remote communities, that it's just devastating when you think about it, that this is fresh mountain water that, is being destroyed. And, we don't have any other resources that we can pull the water into this area. And so, the devastation of the watershed means that, there's going to be no more drinking water, no more, fresh, like sources for water for the animals and the vegetation residing in that area.
And what about the trees, the old growth trees? What do they mean to you over there?
The old growth trees, they mean life. It is very much ingrained as a part of my culture that, the sacred trees are there for protecting us. Trees, not only do they protect us, but they also provide the oxygen and the necessary, supplements to allow life to continue on. And so for centuries, Indigenous people from this territory have always, been very selective as to what kind of logging they're doing and what trees they take. They don't take more than what they need. And it's the taking that they do is designed, for cultural purposes. Like people always think that, like our canoes, yes, our canoes are made of cedar. Yes, so are our longhouses. Cedar is one of our most traditional medicines that very few people talk about that. It's nutritionally good for us as a tea, as an aromatherapy. So cedar trees are sacred to us, as well as, like all the vegetation that comes from it. And right now, the trees that are being destroyed are tens of thousands of years old. So we're talking, trees that have a tree trunk basis of like well over 20 feet just at the foot of the tree. And now, we're seeing those trees are getting weaker and weaker as the weeks go by, because they need the baby trees around them to support them. And now they're losing that support. And as far as the government goes, those ancient trees are worth more money laying down than they are standing up, which is, like a hypocritical thing to even think about it. But, this government up here, that's all they think about. It's like, how much can we get for that tree? And then we have corporations like Teal Jones and Western Forest Products who are saying, we need those trees to keep living. Well, we all need those trees, but we need the trees to stay alive. So, like, I wish that, Teal Jones and Western Forest Products and every other forest industry would take a few lessons from the First Nations people who, have never taken more than what they needed. And when we have taken trees, they've always been replenished with new trees, new growth. Like I was saying earlier, for my birthday, my 63rd birthday, I told people that's all I wanted was to plant the seeds of justice. And that's what I've been doing, all over the place, whether, it's here in the city or if it's at the Blockades. I've always talked about food sovereignty for the people on the Blockades, as well as food sovereignty for the vegetation that is being destroyed.
For people who don't understand, what's the difference between a hereditary chief and a band council? These are big questions, I know that.
Oh, well, I could be really cheeky and give you a really smart-ass number and say, well, one is determined to destroy a community and the other one is to build a community. Because, the electoral system was introduced to our people when colonization came along. And so now here we have, one group of people that practices the electoral position, which means that we get a new chief every 3 or 4 years. And, they're reinforcing the policies that were brought along with the colonizers. To the hereditary chiefs who are born into this position. So they have learned the traditional ways of how we should be living, and that's all that they've been trained for since the day they were born. And now, they support the natural law, and you can't take away that position. Like right now, I was saying that we have a situation with Pachidat and Dididat where, the Pachidat people have an electoral system. So they get a new chief every 3 or 4 years. To, the Dididat people who have the hereditary rights. And it's like, okay, so we're really caught in a crossfire at this point where, our people are saying, who do we follow? Because our band members have been subjected to a lot of, residential school survivor syndrome. So that's the PTSD to, the 60s scoop. So now these people are trying to come home, but they're coming home with the colonizing mind thinking. And what are they coming home to? Something else that's more dysfunctional. So, yeah.
Yeah, and how do you think the British Columbia government, John Horgan and the NDP, when he says he wants Indigenous reconciliation, does that resonate with you? What do you think he means?
I think when John Horgan says statements like, I want truth and reconciliation, he wants it on his terms. He doesn't want it on the terms of the Indigenous people. I think we should be asking the Indigenous communities, do they want truth and reconciliation? Because, you might hear the answers that I would give, which is like, how can we have the truth without, reconciliation? What is reconciliation? Did we ever have it in the first place? We spoke the truth about residential school, and so many people denied it and said, oh, you're imagining all the criminal activities that were happening there. That would never happen in my church. It would never happen in my school. And all of a sudden, voila, we got the orange t-shirt things coming out, and we literally have, the remains of our ancestors being unburied by the hundreds each and every day. And so, we've had to carry this trauma for most of our lives, and that was our truth. We said it, and when we said it, nobody believed us. They basically called us liars. And so, now, the truth is coming out, and the non-Indigenous people can barely stand it. So they're living in a state of, shock and denial. And I'm like, reconciliation? Tell me what this is. And, so for John Horgan to say that, I think that if he says that and he gets what he wants, it's because it's what he wants. And it would be done on his terms.
When he talks about agreeing to a 2-year moratorium in the area, the Ferry Creek watershed, what does that agreement mean to you? Does it go far enough? What are your thoughts about the moratorium?
It doesn't go far enough. As much as, I hate saying this, but I would agree to a break, we have to do this. We have to do this for the safety of the children's future. We have to do this for the, for the trees if we want the old growth to stay a little longer than 10 years. Let's have, a 5-year moratorium, and let's do some retraining of some of those loggers who already know the woods. They already know the terrain. Why not get them converted over to replanting? And, so it's kind of like, okay, so 2 years? No. What's going to happen in 2 years? A lot of trees are going to be gone, and then there's a provincial election. He'll come to the rescue and say, look what I'm doing for you guys. And so I look at it, that's an election ploy, that's that strategy that, a lot of parties are familiar with doing, right? So, I don't think 2 years is long enough.
Yeah, and it doesn't cover the area. I mean, since we've already seen that the Kaikous watershed has been completely destroyed while he's been saying that there's a 2-year moratorium.
Yes. On the day that, John Horgan was announcing the 2-year moratorium, Kaikous was destroyed. But there was logging trucks being seen literally driving through, Honeymoon Bay, Shawnigan Lake, Cowichan, and it was like clockwork. Every 8 minutes there was a truck going by, fully loaded, and every truck going by, the trees were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's like,
Yeah,
You know,
and then other bands like the Gitkasan have now asked for moratoriums as well, and there's been no response. What do you think about other bands asking for moratoriums, and is John Horgan going to respond?
I don't think John Horgan will respond in the way that, most of us would like for him to respond, and that is, yes, to have a 5-year moratorium for the entire province. That would be awesome. It would be just a baby step, but I think it would be the best thing that we could do for our future. But he's not going to go for that. It's almost predictable at this point that he's not going to go for that, but he might consider a 2-year moratorium. But I think everybody right now is just playing the wait and see what happens at Ferry Creek right now before, any of the politicians say anything.
What would you like to see happen?
I would like to see the entire province just go down for a 5-year moratorium, and let's, get everybody back to the table and say, okay, let's create a better plan, like a business plan, where they have, outcomes labeled up to 5 or 10 years down the road. Why not create a business plan for, the preservation of our trees?
What do you think about the loggers who are saying, well, this is our income, this is our jobs, but on the other hand, these trees are going to be gone within 10 years anyway, so
yeah.
What happens?
I think the loggers, if the loggers had it their way, yes, all the trees would be gone. But then there are just a handful of loggers who are slowly, opening up their hearts and their minds to hearing the words of the people on the blockades who are saying, now I see what you're talking about, now I understand. And, I think they could be, easily persuaded if their income was guaranteed, for the next 5 years. That, okay, let's do some job training, let's invest in your future, let's, get you planting some trees, let's get you cultivating hope for a better tomorrow for not only your family but the entire community.
Do you have, on this topic of money, do you have any sense of how much the bands make versus the loggers versus Teal Jones? I mean, is it an equal share, or is there a disproportionate?
Oh, it's a huge disproportionate part, because the band has always been the underdog. They don't get enough money to sustain themselves. And then, it's like, okay, then you get, the loggers who are saying, we need enough money to, support our families. Well, so do the First Nations communities. They have the same needs. They have, food on the table, feed the kids, look after your health, take care of the house. All the bills are the same, but the disproportionate portion goes tending towards the Teal Jones and other corporations who, take a huge chunk of the money and they keep it for themselves, right?
Have you, when you've been on the blockades, have you had any interactions with the police there?
Direct or indirect?
Either.
Because, with the police, I've been there when the police have, surrounded everybody, and they started picking through the crowd who they were going to target, and the police have become very famous for targeting Indigenous people. And, usually right after they've picked out all the Indigenous people and separated them from their support teams, then they like to go after the youth. And, the youth who are very fearless will stand up and, take a zero tolerance stand with the police. So, of course, the police haul them off. And, there's people like myself who have been around at different protests, different blockades for, well over 30, 35 years. You can see it coming. You can see which cops are the most evilest demon people that have pure hate. And then you see the cops that are, kind of like, oh, this is very intimidating, because, those cops, they get it, why we're there. And, they're saying, but this is my job. I have to do this because this is my job. And, then there's the ones that are kind of like in the middle of the road who are saying, yep, here we are again. I've had situations where the cops even know, those of us that have been on protest lines, they even know us by first name. So, it's kind of, like hypocritical, when I sit back and I think about it, and I think about, those cops who say the same things, like the issues that we're dealing with today around, the forestry. We were dealing with it, back 40 years ago, with the Carmanah and Mears Island and South Moresby. It's like, okay, so we were dealing with them. Unfortunately, the government wasn't dealing with it. And so it's like, okay, how many more times do we have to come here? How many more people will be arrested? How many more people will pay with their lives?
Are the police being used as a private military force for Teal Jones?
Oh, yeah. My instinct right away says yes. Because the police have made it very clear that, there's not enough of them, first of all. But then, it's also them saying, well, like, they're paying me to be here. And I'm like, so are we, like, we pay the same taxes. And, we deserve just as much protection from the corporations as the corporations need from us, right? And so people don't always, warm up to that idea that, that the people on the blockades need protection. And so we've got our own stance now, who protects us, who keeps us safe. We protect ourselves. We keep ourselves safe because we can no longer trust the security of Teal Jones.
Do you have a sense, and you might not know the answer to this, but the cost of the police forces, the cost of the arrests, the cost of the criminal justice system, the cost of court litigation, do you think all of these costs outweigh the actual money we will get from cutting these trees?
It's getting close to it. Right now it's just like right under that line, and I'm believing that, by the time, they deal with everybody, which could take another 6 months, so that puts it, 2021 will be the year that Ferry Creek will still keep standing, will still keep fighting for what we are defending. I believe that the cost will be far more than any other, blockade.
What do you think is the future of the NDP government under John Horgan?
I think John Horgan will only be receptive if it benefits him.
Yeah.
Yep.
What message would you have for him if you could speak to him today?
If I could speak to him today, I would tell him that we need to have a 5-year moratorium province-wide. We need to put a stop to all the shenanigans and the destruction of Mother Earth, because Mother Earth only has one plan. There is no plan B. Once these ancient trees are gone, they're gone for life.
And where do you find your own sense of activism within your own spirit? How do you stay motivated after all these years to keep fighting?
I find my own sense of activism, in many different ways, shapes, and forms. When at one point, this past summer, I realized that I was now starting to teach the grandchildren of the people that I first started teaching 40 years ago. And it's like, wow, okay. I know your grandma. and all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I know. My grandma said so. But, it's like, then I see, new ideas coming up. Like, I've seen some incredible things that have been happening on all different blockades here, and I'm like, holy macros, okay, 20 years ago we wouldn't get away with this, and I'm like, but then 20 years ago, we were a part of, breaking the change, breaking the system, empowering the next generation. And that's where I really relish in that thought that I'm just a part of the system that is uplifting the next generation. And hopefully one day, the politicians will make the right decision and say, no more trees are coming down. And that, there'll be a day that, all of us, that have been on the front lines can say, now we can take a breather.
Is there anything you would say to anyone who's watching this who might not really understand the situation and maybe would want to get involved in the protests or learn more? What would you say to people who want to get involved?
I would tell people that there's many different ways that they can get involved with, making their issues heard. Whether it's, being on the front lines at the blockades, or if it means, like you're coming and doing a rally on a regular basis, or if it means that you are writing, you could be writing letters to the editor, you could be speaking to the radio show host, and, just say it as it is, this is wrong or this is right, put whatever opinion you want to put out there, just keep talking, and just, keep understanding or making an effort to understand why we're doing the things we are doing, because the actions that we do on any blockade, whether it's Ferry Creek or whether it's for the missing and murdered, or if it's for the children who never made it home, it's about the community. Not just myself, not just you, it is about the whole community. And so we're looking at preserving the future. And right now that future doesn't look as strong and as healthy as what it should be looking at.
Almost just a couple more and then I'll let you go, but I was wondering maybe if you could just talk about respect for the matriarch and the loss of respect for the matriarch in a society that is so dominated by the patriarchy and colonialism and neoliberalism, and just what that loss means to you and maybe how we can find that again a little bit.
Finding, out the roles of the matriarchs, it starts with respect. It starts with respect, and that is something that has been lost as, as we progress, as we, say that we are growing. Unfortunately, we're growing and we're leaving behind that word respect. And I always tell people that, how we treat our women is a direct reflection of how we treat our mother. And we all have one mother, and her name is Earth. And so if we have no respect for Mother Earth, we continue to destroy her, drop contaminants into her, take away all that she gives us. It's very sad to think that's how we treat our women, our life givers. And that's sad because, this lack of respect came through with colonization, because there was a time that matriarchs ruled their community. And over the years, I've learned that when we were left on our own, it was the women who looked after the entire community while their men went hunting and fishing. And it was the women who made up the rules of how people were going to function within their immediate family and in the extended community. And so, women were rulers, men were providers, and it was a well-balanced, existence. And then when colonization came along, it was like that hourglass got turned upside down.
How do we, and this is another tough question that you might not have the answer to, but how do we, all of us, heal from the traumas of colonialization, of capitalism, and make a better tomorrow for all of us?
The healing process for a lot of our people is a long healing process. It's a lifetime commitment. So I always tell people, throw away your watches, because guess what? You're not going to heal in 5 minutes. It may take you 5 years, it may take you 50 years, but it's important to continue that nurturing. That nurturing could look at, you know, like, what do? You take a half an hour of time just for yourself, just to do nothing, to, you know, do some self-meditation, or, you know, you go out and you read to your neighbors, or you go out and you cut the neighbor's lawn, or, you know, you contribute to your community in a different way. And it's okay to take that time for self-care. And that's something that, you know, a lot of us are missing, is that it's okay to take that time for self-care. And it's like, okay, now what else do we do? You know, we can always, you know, make a donation of time or money, or, you know, clothing. That makes some people feel fine. But I always tell people, take that time to heal within yourself, and then take the time to listen to the people. When Indigenous people are speaking, take all the time that they need, because there's way too often I will come into a circle and people will like, hurry up because I have to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know, stop the freight train. Because you know what? You know, I've come up to this blockade, whether, you know, it's in the forestry, or if I've traveled up island to go to a missing and murdered, or whether I've gone across the border to speak up about, you know, the Salish Sea. I've invested a lot of time in coming here. I'm willing to share the wisdom that I do have with you. At least you could spend the time listening without interrupting. And so that's also a part of that healing process, right? And a lot of people don't give it the time. And so when I was telling people about, you know, like, we're having a rally of some kind, that the beginning of a rally or a celebration of any kind is just as important as the end. Because, you know, at the beginning you hear who the speakers are, you learn about how to honor and gift the individuals, you learn to set up the tables, because not everybody, you know, wants to be a part of that honoring ceremony, but there is a huge honor when you're setting up a table, when you're putting out chairs, when you're running to help a person who can't always make it. Running and helping them is just as honorable as it is, you know, when you're asking them, oh, you know, like, that's the end of the rally? Cleaning up and being respectful to the land or the space that you're in. Leave it cleaner than what it was when you went in, is one of the models that I have. And it's like, yeah, that's that time that you can spend with, you know, the speakers or with the people that we're organizing. You learn a lot. You know, while your hands are busy doing something else, it's like, yeah, share some stories, right?
Well, I learned a lot just by speaking with you today, and I hope anyone else who gets to listen to you gets the same amount of inspiration and knowledge.
Yeah.
Grandma Rose, you are such an amazing inspirational speaker, and I thank you so much for your time today.
So I just want to encourage people, you know, when I'm thinking about, you know, like, I gave a lot of the information out about connecting from climate change to the missing and murdered to, you know, like, having, you know, this interview on these steps for the very specific reason of, you know, remembering the children who never came home. And this is what our people have had to overcome in the last 60 years, you know, all the missing and murdered children, you know, being called down and condemned for telling the truth, and yet we still rise up. That shows the true strength in, you know, the Indigenous people, because when we continue to rise up, it means that, you know, like, we're ready, we're making changes. And so when I ask the allies to come and really listen to our Sitlia, what is in our heart. So speak from the heart, not from, you know, the eyes and the buttocks, which usually has your wallet in it, because that doesn't really do any justice in it. It's like your Sitlia first. And one day we will be able to, get things under control. Because I use that term even with saying control. We will never get rid of the oppression, but we can get it under control.
Wow.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.